Guys, I have a problem. I have a great idea, but I'm afraid I'm gonna waste it. You see, I'm 17. No, look at me. I am 17. And I've started to write a fantasy series. In the beginning, it's just for fun, but I'm starting to really like my ideas. Now here's where the problem comes in, okay? The only problem... This is so hard. I don't know if we can say it. The only problem is... God. Why? The only problem is... I'm not a very good writer. I wouldn't say okay, I wouldn't say that I'm bad, but I'm definitely not good enough to publish anything, okay? I have been lurking this forum for months, and I know that I need to write and practice and everything, but that makes me even more scared because I'm afraid I'm wasting such good ideas on experiments, okay? And that when I'm capable of writing something publishable, I won't have any ideas. Should I just write other stuff and wait until I'm older to write this awesome idea? What do I do? Why do I have to be so bad? Why do I have to only ever have one idea? I just can't do this. Hello, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I am an author, editor, robot, and today we're talking about sit down and write your book. So this is more of I feel like this is more of like a pep talk or a motivational speech of some kind. I browse a lot of writing forums and places where writers kind of hang out, and I see kind of this idea a lot where it's I'm a new writer and I don't know if I can write this idea. I don't know if I have any other ideas. I don't know what to do or how to practice. And the thing with writing is it's like any other skill, and you kind of have to do it to get it done, right? So you can't just pick up a violin and suddenly be a master at violin. You have to practice the violin. You can't just sit down at a piano and suddenly be great at piano. You can't just sit down at Photoshop and just be great at Photoshop. It takes time and exposure and practice and a certain number of hours, and you won't get there without ever having actually done it. Now, under this idea of I'm afraid of wasting this one brilliant idea that I have. Well, first off, I'm going to say you're probably going to have more than one brilliant idea that you really, really like. Especially as you start writing more, because once you start getting your mental juices going, your creative juices going, your brain is going to start finding places to be inspired and creating more ideas. At least that's kind of been my experience, and I'm going to assume that once you get going, you're going to start finding more ideas to play with, especially as you start interacting with characters, figuring out how to write characters, figuring out how the mentality goes. You're going to be able to build something more. This isn't your only idea. And number two, as I would say probably most authors can tell you, if they've cut something out of a book or out of a short story and they found that it was not usable, it doesn't mean that it's gone. You can always, write something really like an idea. It's not fitting in the story, so you take it out, but you can use it somewhere else. So an idea is never really wasted, even if it doesn't end up in your final product. It doesn't just go away unless you completely delete it and then you forget about it entirely. But an idea doesn't just disappear because you wrote it and then deleted it, or you wrote it and decided you didn't want to use it. And the third thing is, and I mentioned this in my video that I did last week about taking your first draft to your second draft, it's when you sit down to write something, when you sit down to write your first draft is not your final draft. In fact, if you just embrace that your first draft will be whatever condition it's in when you're writing it, you don't have to worry about, am I good enough or not good enough to write this? Now, do I know how to piece these ideas together is a legitimate concern, but it shouldn't stop you from writing, because the way that you're going to learn how to fit stuff together and how the flow of a story works is by writing the story. In my experience, in my opinion, there are a few better ways to learn how a story flows than to actually write a story from beginning to end yourself. Now, that's not to say your story is going to be perfect the first time you write it, and that's also not to say that your first attempt at a feature novel or a feature story is going to be great and make sense. It's probably not, especially if it's more epic. I've got a more epic sci-fi story that I wrote in 2016. I think I wrote it in late 2016, and it's a mess. It is 100% a mess, and it's like 160,000 words, and a lot of it is unusable. As I think about it, a lot of it is unusable. There's like a 60,000 word flashback in there, but it's got two central characters that have to meet, and I already know that one of them is totally missing whatever his plot line is. So I've only got half of a story there. And a couple of years ago, when I started working on that, I didn't know if I had the ability or the knowledge to really piece together and do as big of world building as is in that story. But I still pushed through it to see what would come out, and I've got something there. I've got stuff that I do want to use, but I have a lot of work I need to do on it. And then I put it aside to work on other projects. Now, nobody ever has to see that version of that project. That's fine, but the idea isn't wasted because I wasn't up to par when I wrote it 4 years ago. The idea's not gone, the characters aren't gone, and it's not ruined. There is this really big fear, and I see this a lot with newbie writers, starting writers, and people that, like, there's a fantasy around their ideas. They have this brilliant image of the world that they're creating and these characters, and it's very cinematic. You know, they can see it, they can feel the emotions that they want to put in the story, but then they're afraid to sit down to put words onto page because they're not skilled enough or they haven't written before, you know, to build that skill that gives their writing power, right? But the only way to do that is to actually the only way to craft that story that has that emotional pull, that has that imagination, that expresses that fantastical world that you're imagining, is to sit down and write the first draft, and then write the second draft, and then write the third draft, and to keep on polishing it. Now, with some advice, with some mentors, with some writers, they will always tell you that your first novel will be garbage because you're using your first novel to basically learn the basic structure of writing and what it's like to actually write a feature-length novel. However, I have met people that say that there's just no publishing ever your first novel, which I think is where this idea comes from of, well, am I wasting this idea if I just sit down and write it? The answer is no, and I don't think any idea is going to be ruined by being your first novel. It just depends on how much work you're willing to put into it. And one of the reasons why that first novel is going to be complete garbage and never get published is because a lot of authors, and I have my own issues with this too at times, is that we look over our work and we go, oh, I really like that, I don't want to delete that, even though it's not necessarily very helpful for the story, or the scene doesn't build the plot line, or some of that. And so the editing can get a lot harder when there is a lot more content that you need to get rid of in order to make the story make sense, or when you need to, some scenes just start at ground zero and rebuild them again as opposed to just revising it. And so that's where your first book is never going to get published might come from. It also comes from not knowing how to structure a story. This was your first attempt at structuring a story, unless you're a pantser and you just didn't structure it at all. And so there's really just a lot more work that goes into revising that very first novel into making it something that is market ready. Now, your first novel and your first ideas, again, are not wasted by virtue of being your first ideas. At the very least, you can write this first idea and then go, okay, that was a practice. I figured out how to do this. Now I'm going to start writing it again from scratch without referencing that. Okay? So technically, then it becomes your second novel, but it's also your first novel. But you are never wasting an idea simply because you don't have the skill level to fully realize it yet. You have to do something in order to start writing if you want to have those skills. And I'm kind of flabbergasted at the number of people that think they can only write their ideas once and then it's over. They can only... Now, you're going to get in trouble with this if, say, you write your first draft of your novel and you think it's amazing and then you start querying it immediately. Now you might kind of run into an issue because you're querying a story that's not ready yet, and you can't query an agent with a story you've already queried and they rejected, generally. The way you become a better author is by writing. By writing and by reading, and you do need to read to become a better writer. When you're struggling with how to do something, start finding authors who are doing what you're doing. In this case, if you're writing a fantasy novel and you're building an epic fantasy and you want to explore different ways of world building, how somebody introduced different mythical creatures, how somebody introduced different mythologies, how somebody transported from Earth into another world, how they did parallel worlds, how they did a completely different world with no parallel world. Start finding authors that do what you are looking to do and start looking in their text to see how they did that. So right now, both of the projects that I'm working on, the one I'm editing and the one that I'm doing the first draft on, both of them are in first person. And I'm not great at first person. It has gotten better. But I can tell in the one that I'm editing versus the one that I'm writing right now, the one that I'm writing right now, the first person voice is much better than in the one that I'm editing. And it could just be because the character is stronger, or it could just be because I've gotten better and more stylized over time. And when I knew that I was weak in first person, I started looking for authors that I like who write in first person. And in this case, Bret Easton Ellis writes a lot in first person. I think, are all of his fiction novels in first person? Either way, when I'm reading his novels, I'm highlighting stuff that I like. The way that he starts his book, the way that his characters are acting, the discussions where I like how the dialogue is going. I highlight what I'm looking for and struggling with. Back when I was writing the project I'm currently editing, Creatures Lie Here, I was looking for how other authors had sort of a magical realism where they had an overlay of kind of another universe on top, not another universe, but like another plane of existence, creepy plane of existence on top of reality. So if you think of like Silent Hills, where it goes from regular into whatever other universe that is on top of where the characters are. So I was looking for other stories that had characters that kind of mixed normal with unnatural. And I also have a character in there who is a 10-year-old autistic boy. So I was looking for how other authors used children in adult fiction. Originally, I was going to make it from his perspective, but I decided not to. When I was originally looking at how a 10-year-old would be portrayed as the narrator in an adult novel, I was looking for other adult novels that had a child narrator, just to kind of see the language difference, because you have to be really careful that it doesn't look like a YA, well, if it's not a YA. So what you need to do if you're not a good writer is freaking write and read your book. But you're never going to get anywhere if you're too afraid to write because you're too afraid to be bad, or you're too afraid to write your ideas poorly. The secret here is, it doesn't matter how many times you write an idea. That idea is not the last time that you have to write it, and that first attempt that you write it is not the only chance that you get. You can keep going, and that first chance, the second chance, the third chance, it is not the one that anybody has to see. The only time somebody has to see what you've written is once you have personally chosen to share it, or if they sneak onto your laptop. But that is a completely different situation. So show no fear in approaching your ideas and playing with your ideas and experimenting with your ideas, with writing and having fun, and maybe struggling a little bit, because writing is not necessarily always going to be fun. In Cain and Abel, I'm at a part where I'm just like, I just have to struggle through writing this chapter, and it's going to be revised later, but I have to write this movement. And so, that's going to happen too. Let yourself be bad. Let yourself be good. Let yourself explore. Let yourself change perspectives and tenses, and just play with language and play with creating images in somebody's head or in your own head, and play with the universe that you see others getting to interact with. By giving yourself permission to just play and have fun, and learn and mess up, you're going to create things you never thought that you could. You'll get back to it when you're editing it, or a couple of times down once you've edited it 3 times, and you'll finally come back to like chapter 1 to do your 5th revision, and you'll be like, whoa, did I write this? This is incredible. But the biggest thing that holds back any author, and I say this as somebody who knows someone who's been struggling to write her fantasy novel for like 10 years or more, the biggest block to you writing your story, the biggest obstacle to you writing your story and to getting your stuff done is just sitting down and doing the work. Let the fear go. Nobody is judging your first draft except you. If you're worried about losing an idea, just have a separate document to put down all your ideas that you would like to use or you would like to use again. Just go for it. This is a PSA. Go for it. Write your book. Have fun. But that's all I've got to say on this. Kind of ranty, not super, but I keep seeing people who are afraid to write or afraid to lose their ideas and don't know how to get their project done. And the bottom line is the only way to get your project done is to sit your butt in the chair and to do it. Best of luck to you. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And if you have any suggestions for a video, also let me know. If you like this kind of content, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Have a good weekend, and don't die. Dear Madam Astra, that's me. We regret to inform you that on August 1st, your employer, Agatha Jane Benedict, owner of the Benedict estate, peacefully passed away in her sleep. Oh, that's so sad. Wait. Let me try that again. Oh my goodness. That's so sad. Yeah, I think I'm ready. With millions of dollars on the line and the opportunity for your every need to be taken care of for life. Tell me, is there anything more valuable than that? I didn't think so. Dead End Drive is a dark comedy novel that makes 3 promises. 1, an illustrious estate in Louisiana. 2, an opulent dinner affair for all in attendance. And 3, and most importantly of all, lots and lots of competitive murder. So if you're looking for a cozy book to settle in with for the spooky season, I've only got one question for you. Will I see you at the whale reading?